come in, but this is the thing we're experimenting with, Menti, to see if we can get a word cloud created.
It's wonderful to hear from Miss Foss that it's a late fall day in Virginia Beach. And you also make me think I really need to up my picture game on Zoom. I don't have a picture associated with my name, but that's a very nice one.
Okay, ladies, we will get going. This afternoon, we have creating equitable computer science experiences, and we have Jenny Chu and Kim Wilkins, who will be our presenters. Go ahead, ladies, it's all yours.
All right. Great. So yes, I'm Kim Wilkins. I am the founder of Tech Girls, and I'm now a student at UVA in the EDD program, and Jenny is my advisor.
Very lucky to have Kim as a student. So I just want to put that out there. We feel amazingly lucky to have her at UVA.
And we are doing creating equitable computer science experiences. We're both passionate about computer science, and we've been working around this for a little bit now, but this summer we had a really great experience with some K-8 teachers to help bring them up to speed on strategies. And so we're going to share some of those experiences. But the thing we were going to try with this Menti, let's see if we actually got anything. You know, what are some barriers? Oh, excellent. Thank you. Because, you know, these barriers are things that cause us not to have equitable experiences. So yeah, teacher has no background, time, big one, obviously, money, curriculum, Wi-Fi, time restraints, devices. Yeah, this is great. So there are a lot of things that can keep us from being able to incorporate computer science. So let's see what we can do. So first, I want to talk about sort of what is wrong, like why, besides those issues that you listed, there's other reasons that we really need to be able to teach computer science, sorry. And this is one of my passions in particular, is the number of women studying computer science. And if you went to the keynote this morning with Kim Clark, you got a lot more background about this. But this is one of the reasons I started Tech Girls, because I went to a conference in 2010 and found out that women study computer science. The percentage of women study computer science has gone down to 18%. And when I studied in the late 80s, it was 37%. And so that really was a disconnect for me, because I knew how important technology was in our lives and just going to get more and more important. And if there weren't the same number, you know, if there wasn't equal representation of men and women, that was going to be a problem. And as you can see, it's only inched up. So it's at 21% now, and that's 10 years. And, you know, there's been a lot of focus on this, and clearly we still have to, you know, do something. And then the other reason is obviously there's a lot of issues with racism. And this is from a slide from a presentation I went to this summer at the Computer Science Teachers Association on critical race theory. And that's really the first time I've ever heard of that, which is a problem. So we have issues that are sort of deeply embedded in us that we might not even be aware of. And there's a lot on the slide. I'm not going to go through it all, but the thing that she pointed out is, you know, just having posters in your room about, you know, be resilient and whatever, like that's surface level. There's so much more deeper we have to go with all these issues. Jenny, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on either of those before I move on.
No, I just, this was just sort of an aside, but watching The Social Dilemma on Netflix, it really kind of came out that there are literally like a handful, like 40 white men that are controlling billions of people's feelings and what they're enjoying and what they're doing in social media, right? And so just the importance of bringing more people to the table and more people in the room as creators of technology, just like Kim was saying, echoing the keynote. But yeah, that's it. Great.
Yep. And then I went to a CS Ed grad conference a few weeks ago, and Mark Gusdile, who is on Twitter and I've been following for forever, he's doing a lot with computer science education. And he just reminded me, like, no more than 9% of high school students even take CS in the US. And so, you know, we have all these ideas about whether it's hard, whether we can do it or not, but we haven't even really studied, like, what does it mean to teach computer science to 90% of the world, you know, 90% of the students. So that just kind of really impacted me because I'm so embedded in doing computer science. I forget that, like, so many students don't even get any access to it. So what can we do? Well, so we're going to take you through some strategies to increase equity in CS. And in the presentation, these slides, there also is a link to like a cheat sheet for this. So you'll be able to see that. So the first thing is implicit bias. And implicit bias is probably the biggest sort of elephant in the room, if you will. It's when our subconscious is treating something as expected as good. So for instance, here are some correlations that we make because our unconscious is making these correlations based on schemata that it's made. So when we're in a room of adults and children, we have made a schemata that tall people are more mature, which works when you're in a room of adult and children. But when you're in a room of just adults and you still apply that schemata, that's a problem. And these manifest when especially when our brain is busy and overtaxed and we're distracted, which I think more than ever is happening in 2020. And so again, we have these, our brain is recognizing patterns. It's doing things to help to take the load off what we have to do consciously, but then we're doing things that we don't even realize unconsciously. And so obviously the first thing you can do is become aware of your own implicit biases. And there are a variety of ways to do that. There's a Project Implicit out of actually UVA and Harvard, right? And it's a program that you can go through and just kind of see where maybe your blind spots are. You can create a systematic process to make decisions. So when you're getting overstressed, when you know that you're going to not have time to think, have an algorithm that you've already made up of this is how I'm going to treat, this is how I'm going to handle a situation, especially situations that might make you uncomfortable or you know that you're going to be in a situation where you're overtaxed. And you could have a what would somebody else do? So this is a way to sort of offload the decision process. So you're thinking about it more consciously, right? So I could ask myself, what would Jenny do in this situation? And hopefully offload some of, get it outside my implicit and make it more conscious again. And then in computer science, it's super important to promote a growth mindset and experimentation culture because that is really what CS is all about. So one of a few examples that Luther Takanovich created some videos. He's a computer science professor at UVA, and we'll show you a link to those as well if you want to get more into these. But for instance, there's a bias that boys take more risks and we have to keep girls safe. And if that's a bias that we already have, and we think that doing computer science is risky because you're experimenting is risky, then that is a association we might make that's wrong because, well, first of all, the bias of, boys take more risks, but also because actually, while computer science is all about experimentation, it's very low risk. Like you can make mistakes all the time in computer science, and actually you do, and that's how you learn. And so it's very low risk to make mistakes in computer science. So I don't know if Jen, if you wanted to add anything to those before I show some examples that came up this summer.
No, I was just going to say that in my own teaching, creating the systematic process to make decisions was actually super helpful for me. And there are examples on the web for sort of protocols. but like what to do when something happens in the class. And, you know, before I wasn't really able to tackle that in the moment, but having that systematic process really helped.
Yeah, and I've that's always been a struggle, an area of mine where, you know, especially if it gets to an uncomfortable topic or something, I would just want to avoid it, right? Like, oh gosh, I don't know what to do. And yeah, so having that ahead of time. So like I said before, we had a cohort of K-8 teachers this summer. I think there were 16 of them that went through a 4-week process with us of learning about computer science and getting lessons ideas for how they could take it into their classroom. And then we also went over these equitable teaching strategies, and they incorporated them into their lessons that they're actually doing right now. So I just wanted to give a few examples of what they did for implicit bias. So, you know, I need to continue to be aware of my own implicit biases towards CS and what I think makes a student a good fit for CS. So again, just that awareness of, I need to consciously think about this and not just take things for granted. Sorry, I can't see this over. Okay. I need to reduce implicit bias work through the lesson plan from the perspective, work through the lesson plan from the perspective of a student. And I think this is really important. And again, especially in computer science, because lessons don't necessarily have a right answer. You're not always going to go to the same place. And so you need to also experiment, just like your students are going to be experimenting with things in the classroom. All right, the next one is to reduce stereotype threat. Oh, the other thing that Luther says with all of these are things that exist and we can't get rid of them, but we can mitigate them or reduce them. So I think that's another thing to really acknowledge, is these things are out there. Implicit bias is part of us. We all have them. They're not all bad. Sometimes, you know, it does the right thing, but they can definitely be bad if they're doing things like stereotypes. So one thing you can do is avoid raising stereotypes. This is something that I struggled with for a while with tech girls, because I didn't, know if I wanted, do I talk about these issues with not as many women being in technology or not? And it's actually through, working with Luther that I learned that I don't need to be the one to bring this up. Now, if they come to me and say, somebody told me girls don't do this or whatever, then we can address it and, be like, oh, well, that's crazy. Look at all these women that do this. But we don't want to be raising the stereotypes ourselves. Oh, and by the way, stereotype threat is when you have the pressure of representing a whole group and you're aware of a negative stereotype about people like you. And you don't have to believe that stereotype, but if you believe other people believe that stereotype, then you could experience stereotype threat. Avoid making students aware of being part of a minoritized group in a deficit manner. So again, making sure that you're not going to bring up just because you know that the stereotypes exist about this particular marginalized group, you don't need to be the one to bring it up. And avoid myth busting. And I guess this is more what I was talking about earlier, is I don't need to be the one that to say, girls are just as good at boys as coding, because that implies, somebody believed that girls aren't as good at coding. And Jenny, anything else on stereotype threat before I get to the examples?
No, I guess just a little bit in case. Yeah, so it's really pervasive. It's one of the, if you haven't heard of it, it's one of the most well-tested and well-founded sort of areas for how people can be primed. So I'm kind of half white, half Chinese. If you prime me to think about my Chinese background before I take a math test, then I'll do better than if you prime me as a girl before I take a math test. And so it's sort of in this vein that we don't want to raise stereotypes or make students aware of being part of a minoritized group. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a book, Whistling Vivaldi, is that what it's called? That's really excellent to explain this in more detail. All right, so here are real examples. Avoid myth busting. For example, stating girls are good at programming too implicitly communicates that some people think that girls aren't good at programming. And, you know, this is where you really need to be paying attention. I'm not going to read this all, but paying attention to the background of your students and the choices that they're making, and to normalize the human experience for any student in the classroom would be a great way to accomplish this. Another thing, and this is more in classrooms that teach computer science at the high school, but, you know, just avoiding putting posters up in your classroom that would only appeal to, you know, some folks and not others folks, like, is a really easy way to help avoid that. Pigeonholing. So pigeonholing isn't just a computer science issue. None of these are just computer science issues, but this one sort of goes hand in hand with stereotypes. So this is when roles are assigned stereotypically, and it manifests when labor is divided based on informal processes, so implicit bias, who has the most abilities, so experience, and then volunteers because they pick what they know how to do. So you want to have explicit systematic process, again, an algorithm for dividing labor or assigning groups. You know, popsicle sticks are an example of a way to, you know, call on people in a random manner that everybody is going to be able to contribute. And then avoid assigning based on experience or volunteers. And I think this also especially is in computer science. With computer science, you're going to have students from all different ranges of background experiences. Some who've discovered it on their own. You know, it's unlike a lot of subjects where they don't, you know, discover it until they're in class. Where computer science, you can do anytime, right? You can go do hour of code. Any student can go do hour of code. And some have found that passion really early, and so they have a lot of experience already. And then you have others who've never, you know, done it before, and they already think they're bad at technology because they're comparing themselves to these people who've been doing it for years. So that everybody gets the experience trying things out. It's very important not to assign things based on experience. Anything else with that? Thank you. All right, so this is an example of choose volunteers from different backgrounds and encourage non-male, non-white students to volunteer and answer questions. It's a lot important to have roles, especially if you're doing pair programming. Pair programming is really an excellent way to tackle computer science. It is proven to help both learners learn no matter what their experience level is, but you do need to make sure that you've got explicit roles and that they're really switching off those roles. So they're each getting to try whatever the pair programming roles are. So making sure nobody just stays in the back seat the whole time. And then that systematic process to call on students during any discussion portions or to create partnerships. Imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is something I am familiar with. I've been experiencing it this semester as my first semester as an EDD student. It's when you feel like, do I really belong here? Like, am I really as good as these other people? And it's because computer science is such a new field, and there are so many stereotypes about it, especially that you have to be really smart to do it. It also is an area where you see a lot of imposter syndrome. You can see imposter syndrome in any field again, but it's really prevalent in computer science, and it can affect anybody. It doesn't just, you know, have to be somebody who's minoritized. So helps students see evidence of their success. Again, this is important because there's going to be lots of evidence of their failure. And that's great. We want to celebrate failure. Whenever I do computer science lessons, I talk about this probably too much, but I'm like, oh, we're going to have some fun failing because, you know, that's how we're going to learn how to do this thing. So yeah, to prevent imposter syndrome, I will take time to highlight successes for coding and celebrate these successes for a few randomly selected students throughout the class period. Anything else on imposter syndrome? Jenny?
Oh, for me, I just think that it's really pervasive. And I was just going to say that thinking to especially elementary students, that positive feedback can be really encouraging, right? Especially important. It's important for any grade level, but I mean, to really get them interested and engaged from an early age.
Strive for positive reinforcement so that, oh, and this is so important, a safe, judgment-free space. And that got brought up this morning as well. In the chat, I saw it. And yeah, so important when you're incorporating. I think it's so important for any environment, but especially again in computer science, because we have all these other things impacting it. It's really important to create that kind of environment. And I think this is the final one, reduce differential preparation. So this is when you are preparing lessons for the experience of the majority. And I know I have done this a lot, like it's just natural, right? Because it's, especially if you're part of the majority, it's your experience already. And then if most of your, it's the experience of most of your students. So it's a really easy thing to get caught up in. So be aware of potential differences in prior experience and spatial ability of your students. Spatial ability is actually one of the differentiators in computer science and can make it seem like you can or can't do it. I have horrible spatial ability. And it was actually computer science and being able to manipulate things in that space with code that actually helped me figure out my spatial ability. And so I think, this is something we just need to be aware of. And then be careful about the allusions and vocabulary you use to explain CS concepts, as many students may not share the same cultural experiences. Jenny, anything else here before I show the examples?
Nope, that's great.
Okay. So this was, I think, a math teacher was going to do a pre-assessment so they could have an idea of the spatial ability and design groups intentionally to place students in role that push them to learn. And having multiple points and differentiation, allowing others to move ahead. This is really important. Whenever I create a computer science project or lesson, I will have what I call challenges, extra activities, and they are so that I can have everybody try to do the base level of what I want them to get through, but I know that there's going to be those that are ready to move ahead. And so I want to have activities for them, but I also don't want the ones who are, still learning the basics to feel any sort of like they're not learning and they're not there. So you just have to do that in a way that honors sort of wherever somebody is in their learning process. And so that is the equitable teaching strategies. I also came up with this sort of top 10 CS teaching strategies, and they overlap a little bit. But these are things that I try to think of anytime I'm bringing computer science into a classroom. And when I was teaching, I was mostly going into other people's classrooms and helping them integrate computer science into their classroom. And so these are the things I tried to help them make sure it was part of their lessons. So student choice is huge, and giving students a choice within a project within some parameters, some guidance, but having as much student choice as possible. Giving students a way to express their creativity. One of the stereotypes around computer science is that it's not creative, and it's like that's such the opposite of it. But one way you get over it is make sure that students understand that they have a lot of creative ways to express themselves. Do set expectations if possible, especially if you're doing a project, like that involves designing a game or something like that. if you can set the expectations, create that rubric along with the students. So one way I've done this is we'll play games that are similar to the kind of games that we want to create, and have the students think about, so when they create their game, you know, what do they think should be the minimum set of requirements for their game, and come up with that together. Make sure that experimentation is highlighted and celebrated, because that is how you learn in computer science. Is you try something, it fails, you try something again, it fails, and you keep narrowing it down, you keep debugging it until you get it solved. Like I said before, differentiate, make sure that you have things that will engage both your new learners to computer science and those who have more experience. Encourage risk-taking. It's sort of embedded in computer science, so you have to do it. Interdisciplinary as much as possible. Computer science is a great tool for integrating other disciplines, because in my mind, just teaching computer science for computer science sake really doesn't make a lot of sense. It's sort of like just learning Word on its own without actually having a way to use it in a real way. So I think computer science is a great way to bring subjects together. Use peer mentors. Again, when you are in a classroom, you're going to have students that are going to actually probably surpass you. I'm a computer science teacher, and there was always a student in the classroom who surpassed, you know, sort of where I was going to go with the lesson. They're great for helping you with the other kids, and you being the peer mentors to other students. So that's a great resource to use, especially if CS is new to you. You need to make sure that feedback is part of the process, students giving each other feedback on their projects, you know, sort of going through that design thinking process and iterating on design is super important. And then giving the students time to reflect on their experience. You know, what did they learn? What was a struggle? Like, I always want them to understand what was a struggle for them. And almost always the type of feedback that I'll get is, that was really hard. I really loved it. Like, I really had a hard time doing this and I figured it out and that was great. So sort of those two are really good together. So all the examples that I was giving you of teachers incorporating equitable teaching strategies are starting to be uploaded onto Go Open VA. While we did this over the summer, we created a group called Charlottesville Computer Science Community. And so this image will link to it, and we'll make sure that there's links other places. But you'll start seeing more and more lessons uploaded here that are already including these equitable teaching strategies. So it's a great resource if you're looking to start to dip your toes into computer science, especially in the K-8 space. And next steps, if you're looking to take them, you know, if computer science is new to you and you need help demystifying it, the CS Institute is the companion program that ran alongside with the cohort that we did this summer. And so all the resources that we use there are shared under the CS Institute. So you can see all the activities that the teachers went through, the resources they created, the videos, like I said, the videos from Luther Tykhanovich, who really breaks down these equitable teaching strategies into a great detail. You can find there. There's also Code VA, which is you know, a Virginia program that is helping teachers get up to speed with computer science. We think that building a computer science education community is really important because you might be one of the only people doing it in your school. And so building a community or getting, you know, having access to others to understand what, you know, you had a question about something or whatever is really important. CSTA, which is a Computer Science Teacher Association. I've been a member of that, and I've been doing some volunteer work on the side. They're an excellent organization. They have several chapters in Virginia already, but you could also start a chapter. And then Jenny and I would love you to join a K-8 CS cohort. We started that a couple years ago, and kind of, you know, this year has been a little challenging with getting together, but we definitely want to offer that opportunity, and, you know, with the ultimate goal of increasing access to computer science for all students. So I think with that, we are done with the presentation part. Looks like we might also almost be out of time, but if there are any questions, we'd love to take them.
Yeah, thank you everybody for attending. And let us know if you have any questions or if you want to follow up in the cohort. But thank you.
Yeah, and you can always reach out to us. I gave her Twitter info, but I can add our emails to the slide deck as well, so you'll have that. Mary, I think you're muted.
And thank you, Karen.
Yes, I was muted. Thank you. Thank you guys very much. And I'm going to go ahead and end our session now. We've got another one right on the heels of you guys. So
All right.
thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
All right. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Mary.